Hello, everyone. Today we'll continue talking about Stoicism, and we'll be discussing insults and anger in particular. So, the Stoics were philosophers. Their main task was to describe the conception of the good life and to articulate the extent to which independence, inner freedom matter, to the extent to which those things are part of the conception of the good life. So, they had this theoretical description of what it is to live a good life, but they were also very practical men. So they not only describe what it would be for one to have a good life, they actually spend a lot of time developing strategies for attaining that good life. So one of the great perks of reading the Stoics is not only that they say, "Oh, by the way, being angry all the time, being anxious all the time is not good for you." You might think, "Oh, yeah, good. Thank you for telling me." But they also actually give you strategies, pretty effective, pretty powerful psychological strategies for lessening those emotions and for having more control over your mental life. And we're going to be looking at some of those today, some of the main ones. So let us begin. So let's begin with insults. So being insulted tends to disrupt one's tranquility. Being, the subject of an insult tends to lead to anger, resentment, frustration, and sometimes retaliation. And all of those are, of course, they feel, right? That their emotions, they feel a particular way. Anger feels a particular way. Resentment feels a particular way. Frustration feels a particular way, and so on. The desire for retaliation feels a particular way. And crucially, they're all kind of like intense emotional states. They are negative, but they feel painful in some sense, right? Like the satisfying ones. Though sometimes we dwell on them and we intensify the pain. But in any case, from a Stoic perspective, because the life of tranquility is the good life, the having of these emotions is undermining one's tranquility and thereby an obstacle to having a good life. Insults come in all sorts of varieties. Some are linguistic, like the language skills, saying bad things. But it can also be like the way you look at someone, right? You can try to insult them by the way you look at them, and they can be insulted if you look down upon them with contempt, for example. Or you can ignore them, right? They're nice. They meet you for the first time. They extend their hand and say, "Oh, wonderful to meet you." You can just stare them down, and your refusal to hold, to grab that, to salute them, to hold their hand is a way of saying, looking at them with contempt, right? So you're actually insulting them, even though you're insulting them by failing to acknowledge, failing them to, to say hi, to, shake their hands. But anyway, so insults come in all sorts of varieties. Here's one, for example, a kind of backhanded compliment. So you have this friend, and then you put on this very nice dress, and then the dress looks attractive, and then the friend says, "Oh, that's a pretty nice dress. It hides your bulges, right? It hides your fat." And of course they're trying to make a joke that pokes something sensitive up at you, namely your physical appearance, that how fit you are. So even though it is kind of a compliment, "Oh, that's a nice outfit," and like, hey, one of the perks is that you don't look as fat in it as otherwise, right? You know that that's an attack, right? That's a personal attack on you, especially if you're conscious about your appearance and your weight. So even though it's like partly presented as a compliment, it's backhanded one is really a kind of insult. Sometimes friends play in such a way that they're not really insulting each other. They're just kind of playing. They have the rough play, but those rough plays can often lead to insults. And sometimes these kinds of comments are intended to hurt, so they're definitely insults. But anyways, the point is that insults are a very kind of wide variety of things, and the point of an insult is to harm you, right? To hurt you, to make you angry, to hurt a particular kind of nerve that's something that is sensitive. So let's just leave it in the general, like at that general level of description. Here's the first kind of great Stoic insight. And this is how it's articulated by Epictetus. Another person will not do you harm unless you wish it. So the Stoic, I mean, one of the great insights is that hurt of the insult is a kind of sting, right? A kind of anger, a kind of like pain, this emotional pain, this sense of anxiety, of this feeling of inadequacy, this feeling of resentment. Those are negative feelings that undermine one's tranquility. That's a way of harming our inner life. And Epictetus says, notice that it is a kind of harm that can only befall you if you accept it, if you grant it you permission. The emotional life, you're being angered or resentful or frustrated, requires that you respond in a particular way. So suppose you really want to be a member of a team, soccer team, and then you're trying out for making it to the team. And as you're trying out, you see some of the people that are already in the team that think very highly of themselves. They look at you and they make some like nasty remark about the way you run or something like that, right? They try to insult you. They try to put you down. It is natural to like just instinctively respond with anger, with resentment, with frustration. because you feel attacked and offended, right? And the Epictetus move is to say they are trying to attack you, right? They're bullies. They're trying to hurt you by making you feel insecure and anger and so on. They're trying to disrupt your inner coolness, tranquility, perhaps so that you don't enter the team, or just because they want to hurt you. They just want you being. Regardless, the point is that they cannot actually harm you. They cannot actually disrupt your tranquility unless you permit it, unless you take their view seriously, unless you accept it as such. So the disruption of your inner tranquility requires your assent, requires your consent. It is not just the result of the external insult, the external thing that happens in the world. You must also, in some sense, accept it. And here's one of the ways in which you can see how you can accept it. To be offended by the insult, right? That's when it feels angry, when you feel the anger, the resentment, the insecurity, when it hurts, when it stings. You can only kind of feel the sting if you have some value, if you place some value on the opinion of the person. If you don't care at all about what someone says, the fact that they're trying to insult you wouldn't actually harm you, wouldn't actually feel, you wouldn't feel this thing. It wouldn't feel like offensive. It is only by bestowing some value to you onto the insulter that their negative opinion actually becomes hurtful. It's only because you want to, you care about being seen well in the eyes of that person, or perhaps people in general, that the fact that you're not feels painful, right? It is your goal to be accepted by that person, or at least, or perhaps people in general, that is being undermined. Is the mismatch between your goal to be socially accepted in this insult. It is that is causing the pain. It is that is causing the offense and the inner, negative emotions. If you didn't actually care about what they thought, the fact that they say bad things about you wouldn't actually harm you at all. Like, why would it if it's not your goal at all to care about what they say? And the Epictetus, the Stoic response is, notice that what I'm saying is true. You have control, complete control over what you care about, in a way of not being hurt by people's insults, by people's attacks, is not to care about what they have to say. If you don't care what they have to say, then you won't be hurt. So they can only harm you if you do permit it, and you do permit it by caring about what they think about you, what they say about you. Otherwise, the insult wouldn't actually be an insult. It wouldn't hit. It wouldn't have any sting. It wouldn't hurt you. So the Stoics was the main Stoic theoretical move, but then they developed different kinds of strategies or practices to diminish the impact or the sting of the offense. So here are some sting mitigation strategies. So someone insults you, right? You're playing out for the game, and then they make a joke about the way you run, right? They try to harm the very capacities that you have for. They try to poke fun at the capacities you have for joining the team, right? They say you're not good enough, you're inadequate. And they do it meanly, right? They want to hurt you. So here's something you can do. You can consider whether what the insulter said was true, right? Is it in fact the case that you're not up to par when it comes to joining the team? Perhaps you need to spend another year or two practicing, developing your skills, being in better shape, and developing your ability to control the ball and things like that. Is it true what they're saying, right? If it is true that you're just not up to par when it comes to joining the team, then the Stoic would say, well, if it's true, why are you upset about it? Like, you shouldn't be upset about truths, right? What you should do is, go practice a lot more so that next year you can try to root for the team, right? But the point is that if what the thing is being said by the insulter is actually true, being angry at it, being insulted by it, being resentful, seemed to be like not the right response. Seemed to be kind of childish. Like, no, truth is truth, right? You conform to the truth. You should not be upset by it. A different strategy is to consider how ignorant or well-informed the insulter actually is. So if the person who's doing the insult, this person in the team, is very ignorant, right? You think like, actually, they don't know what they're doing. I have no idea how they got into the team. They're probably related to the coach, and they like bribe the coach or something. Like, they're actually not good judges of the thing they're talking about. My skills in soccer. If the insult is coming out of ignorance, then it seems that like either correcting them, like, no, you don't know that. This is actually a very good way of of running, or perhaps just ignoring them, something like. It seems that if the comment that is meant as an insult is coming from ignorance, they don't know what they're talking about. It also seems petty for one to like respond angrily, right? And that's what you think, right? So when you think about, is what the person's saying true, and if the answer is yes, then like, why are you upset about it? And if the person is ignorant, then you think, well, then they don't know what they're talking about. Why would I be upset either? They're just coming from a position of ignorance, and that's actually not reflecting on my ability to make it to the team. So either case, I shouldn't be upset. Um, and this is a slightly different is the way of addressing the insult. So now consider not so much whether it's true or whether or not the comment is coming from a position of ignorance or being well informed, but whether you admire or respect the person making the comment, right? So again, let's keep with the same example. So if it is someone in the team, I said, "Hey, your running is not up to par," so some such observation, and you ask yourself, "Do I admire? Do I think highly of this person's opinion? Do I think they know what they're talking about?" And if you do, you think like, actually, yeah, they're pretty good. Like one of the reasons when I want to join the team is because they're so cool and I want to, hang out with them and learn from their abilities. Then perhaps you shouldn't be offended by what they say, but rather take it as a kind of constructive criticism. If they know what they're talking about and they're pointing to a deficiency in your performance, then it likely means that, and by your own lights, they're expert, right? They do know, you do respect and admire their opinions. Then you should take it as positive criticism. And again, you shouldn't feel offended. You should try to improve. And if you don't, right? So that's if you do admire it, you think they know what they're talking about. But if you don't admire it, you think they're ignorant, they don't know what they're talking about. Then again, why bother? If you think that they are ignorant and if you don't respect that or their opinion, then the fact that their opinion is against you shouldn't count at all. Um, Again, to be bothered by someone's opinion is in fact to endow that opinion with some value. But if you ask yourself, do I value that opinion? And your response is, no, it's not, because they don't know what they're talking about, then like anger is just not appropriate. So the kind of final result of all of these strategies, and there are more that Stoics put forth, is that the anger is this emotional response that is kind of irrational. The resentment is a kind of emotional response that is irrational. These options are supposed to cover all logical possibilities. Either what they say is true or it's false. If it's true, then why bother? If it's false, then why bother, right? Like, so if you actually think about the situation, the Stoics say, anger is just not appropriate. Anger is a kind of foolish response. It is to endow with value something that doesn't, or it is to misrespond to something that is valuable. So to be angry, if you think about it, you wouldn't respond angrily. And the more you do these kinds of practices, here's where Irvine says, as we make progress in the practice of Stoicism, we will become increasingly indifferent to other people's opinions. He thinks the more you start thinking about whether or not you're offended by people's comments around you, the more you start thinking about these things, the less you're going to start caring about it, because the only opinions you're going to start caring about are the ones that by your own lights are worthy of listening to, and the ones that are not worthy of listening to by your own lights, then you won't bother. So there'll be this increasing distance between your self-notion, your conception of self-worth, and the way in which people see you, right? So you become increasingly indifferent to people's opinions. And the Stoics think, yeah, that's what you should do, because that makes you have your inner tranquility, you kind of healthy detachment from things around you. And that's a kind of growth and wisdom. It is wise not to be consumed with people's opinions about you. In fact, to grow increasingly indifferent towards them. So anyway, those are strategies for minimizing or mitigating the sting, right? The hurt that happens when someone attacks you, when someone insults you. But none of them actually tell you how to respond, right? None of them tell you how do you deal with the insulter? How do you actually respond to the insulter? Here are some of the strategies or some of the recommendations that Stoics provide for how to actually respond to these insults. The main one is something like humor, right? If again, the same case, someone makes a remark about your inability to play well. The Stoic says, first thing, don't be angry, right? Don't feel the sting. Okay, once you do that, what do you actually do? And they recommend, well, if you can find a clever, humorous way of responding, it kind of diffuses the situation. And before, typically when someone insults you, they do it in front of an audience, right? They want other people to see that you've been humiliated and for other people to laugh at you or to mock you because of their insult. And if you have a clever, humorous response, then it turns back the attention on the insulter. And it turns back the attention in a particular way. It illustrates to the insulter and to people around them that you did not get hurt, right? That the sting that was supposed to come to you, right, that did not reach, right? So that the insulter failed to actually harm you. So it's a way that everyone says to insult the insulter. That's how he puts it, but the point is that it's a way of telling the insulter, I actually don't care what you think, right? It's a clear way of saying your attempts at hurting me are failing. And in fact, I can turn it on you by this clever, humorous response. It is a way of not taking the insult seriously. And people that are bullies, people that insult others and enjoy harming them, only do so because they can get away with it, right? They can actually harm you, and then they keep doing it. So by showing that they fail to actually harm you, that the insult wasn't insulting to you because you don't care what they think, you deprive them of the power that they have over you, and thereby undermine their very ability to insult you. And you're likely, and it will be likely that they won't insult you in the future, because the whole point of them insulting you is to hurt you. And if you are clearly showing that you won't be hurt by their purported attempts and insults, then they'll stop. I mean, doing the cleverest humorous response at the spot, especially when emotions starting to stir up, is pretty hard. Here's a much easier thing to do: do nothing. Like, just ignore it, walk away. But crucially, don't walk away with a very angry face. I'm like that's doing something, right? That's letting the sting hit you and then walking away because you're not clever enough to respond. The Stoics do mean like do nothing. Like, someone says something mean and you just like, act as though you didn't hear it. And part of what that means is that you do not feel the sting of the insult. If the insulter sees that they did hurt you, and then you have nothing to say and just walk away because you're not clever enough to respond, that they won, right? Like, they did hurt you, they did insult you, they did undermine your tranquility, they are making life worse. The doing nothing doesn't mean get upset and walk away. It means do nothing, like just walk away without accepting the sting coming from the attacker. And that is a way, again, of taking away the power from the insult. That's a way of clearly depriving the insulter of the power they have over us, of our mental life. And if you do it well, which is just like ignoring them, then they would realize, right? For you to do well, they'll realize that their attempts at hurting you are failing. And that's the main point, that the way you respond, humor, doing nothing, we're going to look at other strategies. The main point is that it sends this clear message: you did not hurt me. And for that message to be that, it has to actually be true that they didn't hurt you, right? Like, if you're hurt and you're trying to pretend like they didn't hurt you, it just comes through and people see it, and you lost, right? They hurt you. Here's a different strategy: reframe the situation. So if you find a way of changing the dynamics in which it's no longer the the one who's bullying and the one who's being bullied, but rather it's something different. Find a way of changing the game. That would be very powerful. Finally, the Stoics actually do recommend punishing the insulter, but they think, at least this is partly cultural, but they think that this can only come from a position of legitimate authority. So parents can punish children that are insulting to others, including the parents. Teachers can punish students. Police officers or people in the governmental positions can punish civilians, and so on. There has to be this kind of like power dynamic that is authentic, that is legitimate, that it has legitimate authority. It's not mere raw political power, but it has to be credible, authentic authority. In that position, it is trying to punish the insulter, claims the Stoic. But crucially, it should not be retaliation. It shouldn't be this kind of anger and desire to get back, this eye for an eye, you punch me, I'll punch you back. To the extent that that's happening, it is the anger that is leading to the action, and to that extent, it is no longer the Stoic model. The Stoic model is one in which the person in positions of authority punishes the insulter for their own good, without the anger, without the retaliation, without the resentment. It's just for the sake of the good of the insulter. It's better for them to be corrected and stop being mean. So in those cases, it's fine to punish the insulter, claims the Stoic. So anger for the Stoics is a very serious problem in humanity. In fact, Seneca describes it as a brief moment of insanity, as a plague that has caused the human race the most misery. And if you look at a lot of like wars and things like that, major events, anger seems to be an important element. So Seneca is onto something. Anger is not one's friend. So anger is the primarily drive the most of the destruction that humans have taken. One of the ways in which anger hurts us is by masquerading as righteous indignation. Righteous indignation is a kind of anger in the face of injustice. And when something unjust happens, perhaps righteous indignation is kind of appropriate. But the Stoics are going to be very worried about. They're going to say that what we tend to do is we tend to distort the situation to make it seem like anger is just righteous indignation, but that's just a way for us to express our anger without it actually being righteous indignations. So they're going to say, hey, careful here. Most of the times, the anger is not going to be your friend. Anger is going to make things worse, and it's going to try to masquerade itself as righteous indignations, but beware, anger is not going to help you. So they provide general strategies for dealing with anger, which, I mean, the insult case is one particular case, but the anger is broader than merely dealing with insults. So here are the general strategies for dealing with anger. One is just be reflective. Again, often anger presents itself as righteous indignation, and it has to do with the way in which we distort a situation. So here's a particularly bad thing we do to ourselves. Someone insults us, someone says something bad, and we feel angry at the moment. We don't know how to respond. We just walk away very upset. And then the next day we remember the event, right? We run it through our heads again and we can feel angry again. And then like 2 or 3 hours the next day or something, we remember the event again and we get angry again, right? Like we seem to somehow be wired to torture ourselves over and over again and going over the event that hurt us. And of course, that's not good for us, right? No one's being benefited by that. We're just hurting ourselves by keep repeating the anger in the face in our own minds, and typically exaggerating and making it worse. The Stoics say, be reflective. Actually remember what happened. When you're in the moment of passion, try to think about it. When you're afterwards, when you're trying to remember this, like to torture yourself, remember, like be reflective, and you'll realize that a lot of the times you're exaggerating things. So you're trying to make yourself much more of a victim than you are, or trying to exaggerate the intentions of the other, and things like that. We tend to do those things to incite our anger for some weird reason. But if we engage reason, and we reflect upon their situations, the Stoic thing, most of the time the anger will just diminish. Um, Here's a more kind of like easy strategy. Just relax your body, lower your shoulders, take deep breaths. If the external, the body is relaxed, the inner mental life will follow, right? So calm will follow, tranquility will follow. If you do the kind of meditation, yoga, and things like that, you will become calmer. Third strategy is to put things into perspective, right? So go back to the same example. You're trying out for the team, and someone makes fun of you, belittles your ability to perform. Ask yourself, how big of a deal is it if, in fact, I'm not good enough for the game? How big is it for me to be a member of a team? How valuable is it for my life? How valuable is it for society, for reality in general? Like, to step away, look at the bigger picture. And what you will realize, claims the Stoic, is that typically we dwell in the anger, the frustration, because we exaggerate, we overblown the importance that thing has. But if we put it in perspective, we realize it's actually relatively insignificant, and it allows us to let go of the negative emotions and move on. Finally, the negative visualizations. You can use negative visualizations to diminish the anger by before it comes, or visualizations at the moment. When you're feeling the anger, you can visualize the opposite of anger, things like loving scenarios, like remember how much your mom loves you and things like that, or remember occasions that are funny. And it triggers bodily kind of responses that are opposite to anger, and it starts diminishing the feeling of anger. So anyway, these are some of the strategies to diminish the power that anger has over your life. Listen here. I'll see you next time.